A couple of days ago, I was unable to give the teaching. One thing is like I wasn't feeling so good. My body's a little bit tired. It's like I was catching a cold or something, and I was a bit tired. So I felt that if I didn't take some rest, then it would give me some difficulties in terms of doing the teaching. So I took some rest. Now, I call it taking a rest, but in actuality, I did have a lot of work that I needed to do. So today I would like to offer my welcomes to everyone listening over the internet, all of the lamas, the geshes, the tulkus, all of the monks, all of the nuns, as well as all of my Dharma friends from all around the world. Now, in the last few sessions, we have spoken in brief about the stories of Mahakashyapa, Ananda, and other background information. So now, today, we will begin to discuss the accounts of the first council in the canon and the sutras and the Vinaya and in the treatises. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when we speak about the first council, there are many different accounts. And if I were to speak about all of them, there wouldn't be enough time. And if we talk about too many of them, they'd kind of confuse each other, and it would be difficult. It wouldn't help us in understanding it clearly. So I decided I would speak in terms of two different accounts primarily. Now, the first of these is the account found in the four-part Vinaya, the Dharmagupta tradition. Now, the other day I was speaking about it as the four scriptures, but that's not actually quite right. So I thought I'd begin, and so I thought it would actually be better to translate it as the four-part Vinaya. That's closer in meaning. In any case, there is the account in the Dharmaguptaka tradition, four-part Vinaya. And then also there is the account in the great commentary on the 100,000 Prajnaparamita Sutra that is said to be written by Nagarjuna. So I thought it would be best to tell it from these two different accounts. And I thought I would then kind of embellish it with accounts from some other traditions, and I thought that would be more beneficial. Now, of these two different traditions, I will tell it as it appears in the first tradition, the account from the four-part Vinaya of the Dharmaguptaka tradition. So now here I have, I'm showing you the order of the account of the first council as it appears in the four-part Vinaya. Now, the first thing is the preparations that the Mallas made for the cremation of the Buddha's remains after the Buddha passed into parinirvana. Then the next is how Mahakashyapa learned of the Buddha's passing into parinirvana. And then there is the Mahakashyapa going to Kushinagara and seeing the Buddha for the last time. The next is the decision to hold the council. And following that is the Bhikshu from Vriji teaching Ananda Dharma to make him feel world weariness. And then there's the account of how Ananda was diligent and achieved the result. And then there's the discussion regarding whether the minor precepts should be relaxed or not. Then following that were the 7 faults of Ananda. The Mahakashapa said that Ananda had committed 7 faults. Then after that is Upali's compilation of the Vinaya, then Ananda's compilation of the basket of sutras. And then there's a little bit about the noble Purnana. So this is the order of the account of the First Council as it appears in the 4-part Vinaya, the Dharmaguptaka tradition. So this is the primary account that we will base our discussion of, the account from the 4-part Vinaya. But there are also in the Dharmaguptaka tradition, there is the 5-point Vinaya. But I'm also going to give according to the account in the Theravada tradition and also in the 5-part Vinaya. So the first of these is, now this is kind of like an elaboration, but the first is now I'm going to take as a basis the account in the 4-part Vinaya, but as like to sort of embellish it, I'll show the order here that it appears in the 5-part Vinaya. And the 5-part, this is Mahisasaka. So this is now the Mahisasaka tradition, not the Dharmaguptaka tradition. And the order that appears in the Mahisasaka 5-part Vinaya is Mahakashapa learning of the Buddha's Pirnana, then the decision to hold the council. Then there's the Bhikshu from Vriji teaching Ananda the Dharma, and Ananda achieving the result. And then there are the 500 arhats arriving in Rajagriha and making preparations for the council. Then there's Mahakashapa asking Upali about the Vinaya. And then there's Mahakashapa asking Ananda about the basket of the sutras. And then there's the discussion of relaxing minor precepts and so forth. Then there's the discussion of Ananda's 6 faults. And then there is the discussion of the need to keep all the minor precepts without any distinction of which to keep or not. Then there is the discussion of Purana, and then Ananda taming the so-called 7 bhikshus. Now, the order is slightly different. In general, it's similar, but there are a couple of different, but some of them are a little different than in the 4-part Vinaya. Now, in the Theravada tradition, there is a text called the Khandaka. This is a Vinaya text from the Theravada tradition. Now, there are 2 parts of it. There's the larger and the minor section. This is from the way it appears in the minor section. And so first, there's the discussion of Mahakashapa learning of the Buddha's Parinirvana. Then there is the decision of the bhikshus to include Ananda among the bhikshus participating in the council, and the 500 bhikshus traveling to Rajagriha and preparing for the council, and Ananda achieving the result. Then there's Upali compiling the Vinaya, and then Ananda compiling the basket of sutras. And there's the discussion of the minor precepts. Then there's a discussion of the 5 faults of Ananda that Mahakashapa pointed out. Then the discussion of Purana. And then Ananda taming the 7 bhikshus. And then finally, there's something that's separate there is a servant girl offering a Dharma robe. Basically, this means that there's a servant girl or a slave girl in the royal palace who offered Ananda a Dharma robe. And then at the end, in this Khandaka, the Theravada Khandaka, there are the verses in summary that summarize all of the events of the First Council. So today, We'll take the Theravada Khandaka and the five-part Vedic as like embellishments, and then we'll primarily focus on the presentation of the first council as it appears in the four-part Vinaya. Now, the day after tomorrow and the next day are the days off, and then on the first day we'll speak about the order of the first council as it appears in the Mula Sarvastivada tradition in the Tibetan tradition. So let's talk about that on Monday. So now we need to look at the order as it is in the four-part Vinaya, right? Now in the four-part Vinaya tradition, at first there is the Mala's preparations for the cremation. So this is what I will speak about next. When we speak about the Malas of Kushinagara, this means the people who lived in Kushinagara. So these are the Malas of Kushinagara. So after the Buddha passed into Nirvana in a grove of Shala trees in Kushinagara, the Malas first bathed his body. And they took a new clean cloth and they wrapped his body in that shroud. And then outside that, they wrapped it in an additional 500 shrouds. Now, in the Indian Vinaya, it always says 500, 500. So now when you say 500 all the time, I don't know that it necessarily means exactly 500. I think it probably means a lot. I think it probably means hundreds is what we would say. So I think it probably means something like that, not literally 500. In any case, in the Vinaya itself, what it says that they wrapped his the remains in a clean shroud, and then they wrapped it in more and more shrouds, and then at the very end, they put it the remains in an iron casket that had been anointed with scented water. And then after that had been sealed, they put that in another instance in which they put the iron casket. It's a big square box that they put the iron casket in. And then beneath that, they took many different types of logs with many different nice scents, and they stacked them around the casket. And so they stacked many of these underneath the casket. And so when you're preparing they're asking to do to light the pyre for cremation, the leader of the Malas tried to light the pyre. He took a candle and he started to light, he brought a piece of light and he lit the fire, but it wouldn't catch and it just naturally went out. And then the most important of the Malas, the people of the higher status, then also they also brought a torch over to light the pyre on fire. But when they brought that over, then the fire that they lit also then went out, and the fire wouldn't start. Now at that time, Ananda said to the Malas, "There's no point in you trying so hard to do this. The gods keep putting out the fires that you light," he said. And so the Malas said to Ananda, they didn't know why this was happening, and so they asked Ananda why this was. Why are the gods putting out our fire? What's the reason or the purpose of it? And when they asked Ananda of that, what Ananda said in response was, Mahakashyapa and the 500 bhikshus are currently traveling between Pava to Kushinagara. They're on the path between the two. And so when the Buddha passed into parinirvana, Mahakashyapa was not near the Buddha. He was in a place called someplace between Pava and Kushinagara. As I'll explain later. And so he was in between these places. He was traveling between the two. And so Mahakashapa had the hope in his mind that he would be able to see the Buddha's remains before they were cremated. And since he had that wish, the gods knew what Kashyapa wanted and what Kashyapa intended. And so for that reason, they keep on putting out the Mala's fire, he said. So after Ananda had explained these realized, then the Malas said, well, Venerable Ananda, if that is so, then we will do as the gods wish, and we will wait a little while. We can't do anything else, they said. In any case, they didn't cremate the remains, and they waited for Mahakashyapa. Now, the second step, or the second point in the order, is Mahakashyapa learning of the parinirvana of the Buddha. And what this means is, so Mahakashyapa, as I said, as Ananda had said, was traveling with a large sangha of 500 bhikshus. Now, as I said before, 500, it's not necessarily 500. It's not you could count them from 1 to 500. I mean, whether it actually means 500 or many, I don't know, but it's always says 500 and 500. In any case, Mahakashyapa was traveling with many members of the sangha between Pava and Kushinagara. So he was traveling between the two. So as it said, I'm going to talk about what do we mean by the place of Pava and Kushinagara. In the ancient times in India, there were 16 great kingdoms. You could say they're great kingdoms, they're great countries. And so basically, these are basically 16 kingdoms in central India. And among the 16 kingdoms, one of them was called the Malaya kingdom, the kingdom of Mala. And the kingdom of Mala had two main cities. One of these was Kushinagara, and the second was called Pava. This is named Pava. So now, these days, this place is called Pavapuri. And I think that this is in the present-day Nalanda district. In any case, the Kushinagara and Pava were large cities, or the most important cities in the kingdom of Mala, which was one of the 16 great kingdoms of ancient of India. In any case, Mahakashyapa was traveling from Pava to Kushinagara, and he was somewhere between the two. And as he was traveling from one to the other, he met some students of the Jain sect. So one of them was there's the Jain teacher Gyatiputra. And so he met some of his Gyatiputra students. And so they had some flowers that had been offered in veneration of the Buddha's parinirvana. So they were carrying these flowers in their hands. And these are Mandarava flowers. Now, I've got, later I'll show you a picture of a Mandarava flower. And in any case, he met some students of the Jain teacher Gyatiputra who were traveling on the road, holding the Mandarava flowers. And when he saw them, he asked them, where are you coming from? And what they said is, we're coming from Kushinagara. And they said, and when the Buddha said that they were coming from Kushinagara, and since the Mahakashyapa knew that our teacher was in Kushinagara, and so that, do you know of our teacher? And they said, we do. They said, yes, we know who Kushinagara is, because they are Jains, not Buddhists, right? Then Kushinabhata said, is our teacher still present in this world? Is he still alive? Basically, he's asking, is the teacher still alive? And they said, he is not, they said. It's been about 7 days since he passed into parinirvana. We just came from that same place, and these flowers that we're carrying are flowers that were offered at the time that he passed into parinirvana. So these are the flowers that we're carrying. So this is what Mahakashyapa asked them. And Mahakashyapa heard that the Buddha had passed away, then Mahakashyapa could say he was sad or unhappy, but he was an arhat. He didn't do like we ordinary people and get really extremely upset as we ordinary people would. But among the Sangha bhikshus around him, there are some who are not free of desire. That is, some bhikshus who were not yet arhats. There are many of them. And when they heard of the Buddha passing into nirvana, many of the bhikshus fell down like on the ground, like stalks of grass that had been cut down. Like they fell right down. They fell senseless on the ground. And after they did this, they wailed in sorrow. And they said that the Tathagata has passed away too soon. It's like the eyes of the world has been blinded. And so I think our teachers are going to disappear, they said. This is what they were wailing. Now, some other bhikshus, some of them just fell on the ground and fell unconscious. Now, some, they're kind of like rolling like logs on the ground. They're writhing from one side to the other, rolling from one side to the other, going back and forth. They're writhing from one direction to the other, and then they're in their despair. They're saying, why is it that the Tathagata has passed into nirvana so soon? And so they wept in sorrow. And when they were weeping and wailing so, now there are a lot of bhikshus there. There are 500 bhikshus, right? Among them, there was one named Upananda. Now, Upananda, he was one that he was one of those who had less good behavior. We have 6 well-known, the group of 6 bhikshus, right? Now, among the bhikkshunis, there are 12 bhikshus. They're called the gang of 12. Among the bhikshus, there are 6. They're called the gang of 6. And so Upananda was one of the group of 6. He was one of the well-known Kipasaks. Now, there are others who are well-known for behaving badly, but among the 6, and he was all the 6 members of the gang. So one of them was him. And when he saw them, everyone, he's trying to relieve them. You elders, you don't need to do that. He said. So elders means people who have seniority in terms of their vows. There's no need for you to weep and wail. Like there's no point to doing it. So we are monks who became older. So we're people who didn't go. That means monks who didn't go forth when they were young, but when they were older. So now people become monks from oldest. Now we're free. We're free. The way we're free is because when the Buddha was alive, he was saying, this is okay, that's not, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. There's no end to everything he said. Now that he's passed away, we're free. And so now we can do whatever we like, as he said. In Hindi, it'd say we're kushi, we're happy. So we can do whatever we like. We can do whatever we want. And see if you want to keep the rules, if you keep them if you want. If you don't want to keep them, don't keep them. And so now we're free. We got to enjoy ourselves now. And so this is what he said. There's no need to cry, he said. And when Mahakashyapa heard this, then Mahakashyapa was again. At first, he was a little unhappy, and then he became even more displeased, and he became very unhappy. And became very upset to hear this. Said to the bhikshus, quickly get your alms and robes. You don't need to act like this. Get your robes and your alms bowl, and we need to go. Before the Buddha's remains are cremated, we need to see the Buddha's face for a last time. And so he immediately encouraged them, and they all gathered their ramzanas and immediately left for Kushinagara. So that's it. So that is how Mahakashyapa first learned of the Buddha's parinirvana. So the next step, the next event was the Mahakashypa's last viewing of the Buddha. You could say his last viewing the Buddha, or the last time. You could also say, we could say the final goodbyes to the Buddha. So when Mahakashapa was leading the 500 Buddhas, bhikshus, they arrived in Kushanagara, and they came outside of this city. First, they got into Kushanagara, and as they outside of the city, there was a river called the Hiryanavati River. They crossed the river. They went to the place where the remains were, which is a stupa called the Makuta Bandhana. So this is either stupa or monastery. They were there. So when they met Ananda. And Mahakashapa immediately asked Ananda, if the Buddha's remains haven't yet been cremated, we'd like to see the Buddha's remains. This is what he said to Ananda. And then Ananda said, we haven't yet cremated the Buddha's remains, but it's a little difficult to actually see the remains. The reason is, as I explained before, the Buddha's remains are not just left out in the open. It's not they just left them right there. First, the remains were bathed, and once they'd been bathed, they'd been wrapped in a clean cotton shroud. Outside of that, there were an additional 500 shrouds. So there's many different layers of cloth. Then after they've been wrapped in all those shrouds, it was placed in a cask or a coffin made of metal. And as it put in there, then that was anointed with scented water and scents. And that metal coffin was put into a wooden coffin. And then beneath that, many branches of trees, tree branches of many different nice scents had been spread out and piled up there. And we're all ready to do the cremation today. So it's very difficult to see the Buddha's face because it's wrapped up too many. It's been wrapped up in too many different layers, and opening it is really difficult. So he said it's probably difficult to see the Buddha's face. But in any case, Mahakashapa went to where the remains were, and as he got close to the pyre, the coffin naturally opened up. There wasn't anyone who opened it. It just naturally opened on its own. The box opened on its own. And the Buddha's foot, right? One of the Buddha's feet stuck out a little bit. It just naturally fell out. When the Buddha fell out, then Mahakashapa saw, when he saw that the Buddha's foot actually had been a little bit soiled. Someone had got it dirty. It was soiled. And when it was soiled, he said immediately to Ananda, he said, hey, he said to Ananda, it's the one who had to deal with all the problems, Ananda. So he spoke with Ananda. The Buddha was such a beautiful, and he had a complexion of the color of gold, just stainless. So in the end, so who soiled his feet in the end? He asked, who did this? And Ananda, what he said is that when the Buddha passed away, there were many women who came to see the Buddha's remains, and they weren't very careful. And when they're prostrating to the Buddha, they're crying, and their tears, they got their tears on their hands, and they touched him with the Buddha's feet with their hands, and that soiled the Buddha's feet. Because women put all sorts of stuff on their hands, and so they had, particularly in India, they put like the coal underneath their eyes and so forth, and they used it. And he said that's how the Buddha's hands were doing it. And when Ananda explained this, Mahakashapa was not happy about it. But in any case, Mahakashapa prostrated to the Buddha's foot. And then all the bhikshus and the bhikshunis, the male and lama participants, whoever was there, all the gods and humans and everyone prostrated to the Buddha's feet. After they'd all prostrated, then the Buddha's foot, once again, on its own, became invisible inside the foot. It kind of like it went back inside the box and became invisible and was no longer visible. And the Mahakashapa let out a long sigh, and he said a few verses, and he circumambulated the pyre 7 times. or there's that pyre, the pile of wood around this, and he circulated that 7 times. And after he'd done it 7 times, then without anyone igniting it, the pyre ignited. So in the past, people had tried to light it. Even people had actually tried to ignite it, it wouldn't light. Now, even without anyone lighting it, it ignited on its own. It's probably because it was waiting for Mahakashyapa to see that, and so then after Mahakashyapa had seen the Buddha's remains and had prostrated and circumambulated, then the pyre naturally ignited. So that's how the Buddha, how Mahakashyapa saw the remains of the Buddha. And after that, then at the time, there were many bhikshus and bhikkshunis. And so Mahakashyapa took that opportunity to say to the Sangha, so the other day when I was traveling here, coming to Kushinagara, there was that bhikshu Upananda. So Upananda, what he said to the bhikshus was, elders, you don't need to grieve. There's no point to weeping and wailing. Now we monks who became monks and older are now free. When the Buddha was alive, he was always saying, this is okay, this is not, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Now the Buddha's passed away and we're all free. So, and we can do whatever we like now. If there are rules we want to keep, then we can keep them. If we don't want to keep them, we don't have to. This is what he said. So, I think that we should all gather together and hold a discussion on the Vinaya. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out. Otherwise, the non-Buddhists will say all sorts of things about us, and they're really going to embarrass us. They'll say the mendicant Gautama's Vinaya discipline is dissipating like smoke. When the Buddha was alive, they trained in the Vinaya together. Now that the Buddha is gone, there isn't anyone who's properly training in the Vinaya, they say. So for that reason, we need to invite many Lord Dharmas to gather and hold a meeting to discuss the Vinaya, otherwise it just won't work. Now the number that now how many bhikshus did they invite? They invited 499 bhikshus. Now all 499 of the bhikshus were all arhats. They all had the progeny of having heard many sutras. Now it wasn't all the bhikshus, but it was among the bhikshus, the ones who were arhats. They had practice. They had the progeny of listening to many sutras. It's not a question of enlightening all the bhikshus. It's like the best of the bhikshus. Now, at that time when they're inviting them, there's what bhikshu said is, what he said is, Ananda must be included among with us who prostrated. He has to be included. So this bhikshu offered his opinion. And Mahakashyapa immediately said, it wouldn't be right to allow Ananda to participate in the council. The reason is that Ananda, he still has desire and hatred, delusion, and fear. Basically, he's saying he's not an arhat. He was a stream order. He was still training. He had not come to the path of no more learning. He was not an arhat. If he cannot free himself of desire, hatred, or delusion, and fear, then he can't participate in the council with us. So this is what Mahakashyapa said. But the bhikshu who had previously expressed his opinion then said, what you're saying is true. But Ananda was the Buddha's attendant. He was always with the Buddha. And he heard many teachings of the true Dharma from the Buddha. Also, whenever he had a question about the Dharma and the Vinaya, then he'd immediately go to ask the Buddha about it. So he's the one who knows everything about the Dharma. So we have to include him in the council, and if we don't include him, it just won't work. And so they all decided that they had to include Ananda. Whatever Mahakashyapa says, it says we have to invite Ananda. This is the decision that they made. They invited Ananda, and the arhats, like there was like the however number many there were, they're all there. And then they all just decided to discuss where should we hold the council, because to do the council would take a certain amount of time. It would take a long time to do this, and during that time, you need to have food and drink, right? And so, where is it best to do it? Where are we going to go and find lodgings and food? And as they're thinking about this, in the end, they all agreed that it'd be good to go to Rajagriha. The reason is that there are a lot of lodgings in Rajagriha, and there's no impediment to there'll be no problems with getting food and lodging. So they decided that Rajagriha was the most appropriate place to hold the council. So they all agreed and made the decision. And then at the end, Mahakashapa said, okay, so we're venerable sirs, we've invited all these pictures, and so this is now the time is right. If you think that this is the time is right, if you are all in agreement, then let us depart for Rajagriha today to hold the council. And so then they all left to go to Rajagriha. So at the time they were still in Kashnagiri. So they're going from Kashnagiri. They first have to go to Vaishali. So first they went to Vaishali.
So this
is how it is described in the 4-part Vinaya. Now, as like to embellish it, what it says in the 5-part Vinaya is, it's a little bit different. It's related a bit differently. And the way is because it says, after the Buddha had passed into parinirvana, Mahakashapa was in a place in Vaishala called Markatahrada Lake. So this lake that was called Markatahrada, or the Monkey Lake, and there's a place called where there's some houses that had been built, and he was staying there with 500 bhikshus. And what Ananda said, so that is basically the same as it. And so at that time, Mahakashapa said to the bhikshus, I heard that when I was way to Kushnagara from Pava, I heard that the Buddha had passed away. When I heard that, my mind was disturbed and I was unhappy. Now at that time, the bhikshus and the male and female lay practitioners, some of them when they heard of the Buddha passed away, some were unable to walk in the woods, some fell on the ground. Some were fell on the ground, some wept and wailed. And they said, the world is empty, the eye of the world has been blinded, they say. And so they really lamented and wailed in sorrow. And so so Mishakapa is saying that, then they said, then I met Upananda on the way, and he said to everyone, don't grieve. And the Buddha was always making rules about what we should do or shouldn't do, that we need to train in this, we shouldn't train in that. He's always giving us a lot of commands and complaining us. Now the Buddha is no longer with us. And so we no longer have to go through any hardship to get things. We can do what we like. And there's no longer any need to be afraid or apprehensive. So why would we sit here crying and lamenting? So now then Kashyapa was saying, when I heard that's Kashyapa, when I heard what Upananda said, then my worries grew even greater. Of course, the Buddha had passed away, but there's still bhikshus and bhikshus, right? So if we all get together and are diligent and hold a council, that's what we need to do. And if we do this, if we don't do that, then there are a few students like Upananda who will weaken and undermine the teachings. And so we have to do this so that does not happen. And when he said that, then listen to Mahakashapa said they understood they had good reasons, that there was a point to what he was saying. They thought it was a very good idea. And so they agreed to have the council. But the bhikshus, what they said to him, said, Ananda always attended the Buddha. He was always serving him. His mind is very sharp. Likewise, he has heard many teachings. And he's like a treasurer.
Kadu chebegi kablia kadu chenge tel sha go dos cheji. Galon des de son droit. En di dusane ge gu sun gar son dosan. Gungo de enta dombe lamla lobsin
And
basana.
so he was like a treasury. He remembered all of the Dharma, that everything that was heard. So he's like the treasurer. So he absolutely has to be included among us bhikshus who will hold the council. But Mahakashyapa said Ananda is still training on the path. That means he wasn't yet an arhat. He still has desire, hatred, and ignorance, and fear in his mind. So he must not be allowed in the council. So there's some differences here in this account in the 5-part Vinaya. So here we're primarily focusing on the account in the 4-part Vinaya. So to continue with that account, at that time, the bhikshus had said that Ananda must be included in that. They decided this, and when the time they made that decision, where was Ananda? Ananda was traveling, wandering without any fixed place, living off of alms. And he came to a really remote place. And when he reached this remote place, what he thought was, see, like we have a newborn calf, like when you have like when you have a yak has a yak calf, it has to drink milk, and so that it has to go wherever its mother goes, right? And similarly, I'm still an individual who's traveling on the path. And so there are probably many arhats have gathered, so I probably need to go follow them. And so this is the thought that he had. Now this place, where were the 500 elder bhikshus? They're traveling down from Vaishali, from Rajaguru here. So because when you're going to Rajaguru, they had to travel through Vaishali. So the 500 bhikshus, I should say, actually the 499 arhats, and they're traveling on the road through Vaishali. Now, at that point, Ananda himself was in Vaishali. When it became really well known in Vaishali that 500 arhats were coming to the Vaishali, and so all of the bhikshus and bhikchunis and the male and female lay practitioners, the king and the Buddhists, and even all of the non-Buddhist mendicants all heard that they were coming. And it's like they say, and it was like really exciting. They're really happy to hear this. And so they all went outside and they were saying hello to each other and saying, who's coming? How are they coming? Where are they coming from? And so they were all discussing this. Now, at that time in Vaishali, there is a bhikshu from Vrichi. So Vrichi was, as I mentioned before, in India, there are 16 great kingdoms, right? Now, one of the 16 kingdoms is called Vriji. And so there's a bhikshu from that kingdom of Vriji, and he was currently in Vaishali. Now, this wasn't just any old bhikshu. He was a bhikshu who had clairvoyant powers of the divine eye and telepathy. That's the type of bhikshu he was. And what he thought to himself is, oh, Ananda is currently here in Vaishali. And so many people are gathering and they're saying that 500 arhats are coming. Everyone's getting together and they're all greeting each other and talking, and they're making a big commotion about this. So I need to see if Ananda is really free of desire or not. Is he an arhat or not? I need to look and see. And so he sat down in samadhi meditation and looked. You know, when you have the clairvoyance, you can't just look at it. You have to enter samadhi and then look with the clairvoyant powers. So he sat in meditation. When he looked with his clairvoyant powers, he saw that Ananda was not free of desire. He still had some desire. He was not an arhat. And he knew that, and he thought, oh, Ananda is not yet an arhat. And then in order to help him become an arhat, I have to do something to inspire some world weariness in him. And thinking this, he went to Ananda and he said a verse to Ananda. And the verse, as we've said, if you translate it, is staying and salted by a tree, exert your mind toward nirvana. Practice jhana and be careful. What need is there to say Allah? The basic point is that you need to go to a remote place and sit under a tree and exert your mantras. In fact, you need to practice jhana meditation. Be careful about it. There's no point in, secondly, no point in saying a lot of dharma. You haven't yet achieved the state of arhat, right? You need to achieve the level of an arhat, he said, right? So when the picture said that, said to this verse to Ananda in order to, inspire world awareness, somebody heard that, then Ananda, I'll speak later about Ananda's, whether Ananda achieving arhatship. But first, we'll take our 30-minute intermission.
So
that was the account from the Dharmaguptaka's four-part Vinaya. Now, the way it's explained in the five-part Vinaya, the Mahashashaka tradition, is basically the same. It's a little different. The main thing is that they explain that Ananda was in Vaishali teaching the Dharma day and night to the fourfold community. So just as when the Buddha had been alive, many people were coming to Ananda to ask him for Dharma teachings. And so that time there was the bhikshu from Vrija who was nearby where Ananda teaching. He was practicing dhyana meditation. But near where he was staying, there was Ananda and there was all these people coming, and there was a lot of commotion and a lot of bustle. And because of that, it made a little bit of an impediment to him practicing samadhi and listening. So he was having a bit of a hard time there. And what he thought at that time is Ananda still on the path of learning? Has he done the task or has he not? What's up? But because he was in an environment where there was so much commotion, and so he couldn't, it seemed that he probably hasn't finished the task. So I'll just look at him with his clairvoyance. And if he entered the samadhi and looked with clairvoyance, then he looked and he saw and he knew that Ananda had not actually done the task and was not yet an arhat. And so he thought that he needed to do something to go over to make Ananda feel world-worthy and generate realization. And then he went to Ananda and said the same verse as described before. So next, when the bhikshu said that verse that inspired world weariness to Ananda, then did it really help Ananda achieve realization or not? It actually was very beneficial for him. Once he had heard that Dharma inspiring world weariness from the bhikshu, he went to go look for a solitary place to stay, where there wasn't so much commotion, and he were in some place where he could be alone, be careful and undistracted, and practice meditation diligently. You could say that before that time, he really hadn't had any opportunity to do such practice. It's because he was always around the Buddha and working around the Buddha, and so there were a lot of people, so he never had the opportunity to go to a place where there weren't so many people, where he could be practice meditation. So one day he went to a place where there was no roof, basically a place where there was no house, or a place where a place where there was no roof or no building. So in any case, it's a place where he was staying in a place when he's staying outside. He was probably sitting underneath a tree. And he took some what we call sometimes he had made himself like a hammock between some branches of a tree. So he made like a hammock for himself hanging between trees. And so he had spent half of the night practicing meditation, and the rest of the time he would pace back and forth. So this is a way of practicing doing walking meditation, pacing back and forth, right? And so he spent, so after half of the night, at midnight, when he got a little tired, he then would pace. And so he paced back and forth. And in any case, he spent the entire night practicing like that, being diligent, practicing in this way all night long. And then in the morning, when dawn was approaching, he hadn't slept all night long. So his body became very exhausted. And he thought to himself, oh, I'm really tired today. I'm exhausted now. And so I need to lie down for a bit. And he sat down I have to sit on his seat. When he sat down, he was so tired that he thought, I need to lie down a bit, he thought. And when he was about to put he went to put his rest on the pillow, but just before, the instant before his head touched the pillow, he had an experience that he'd never had before. And at that very point, then Ananda finally reached the undefiled state and became an arhat. Now, at that point, he recited a verse. And if to translate it coarsely, I've heard many Dharma teachings and always honored the Buddha. Now I've severed the birth and death Gautama. Today I'm glad to sleep. And so the basic meaning is that he'd spent in his lifetime, he heard many different Dharma teachings, and it always had great opportunity to serve and honor the Buddha. So now he's severed the cycle of birth and death and achieved the state of birth and death. So Gautama, so Gautama, so now you can be now you can be glad about that. I think that's the basic meaning. So that's how it is described in the 4-part Vinaya. Now, the 5-part Vinaya speaks about this, speaks similarly about the way Ananda became an arhat, essentially the same way as the 4-part Vinaya, but the difference is that in the 5-part Vinaya it says that the Bhikshu said to Ananda, you better finish the task soon and become an arhat, because Kashyapa is going to hold the council really soon, and there's no plan to include you. In addition to that, Ananda had heard the verse spoken by the Bhikshu from Rijit that inspired world weariness. And what he thought to himself is that said, Ananda is going to hold the council, I'm not included. And so I need to be really diligent and achieve the state of arhat. And so I'm going to spend all night, I'm not going to sleep tonight, and I'm going to practice meditation. And so it got to be midnight. He soon got to be nice. He was got up and was pacing, walking back and forth, doing walking meditation in order to achieve the ultimate result. But he had been practicing all night long. He didn't achieve the state of arhatship. Now, when the sun was about to rise, Ananda himself got really tired. And he thought that he would lie down. He thought, I have to lie down and sleep. And he was just about to lie down. Just before his head touched the pillow, he had realization and became an arhat. So this is what it says. So when the Bhikshus learned that Ananda had achieved the result of arhatship, they immediately went really quickly to see Mahakashyapa. They said, Ananda, you reached nirvana yesterday, you became an arhat, so we need to include him on the council on the Vinaya. So before that, the main reason why Mahakashyapa had not included Ananda in the council, the main reason was that Ananda was not yet an arhat. And so now that he's achieved the state of arhat, so now we didn't include him, so Mahakashyapa couldn't say it wasn't okay. So no, at the time that Mahakashyapa was thinking, what he then thought was, oh, then where do we need to go? Where's the best place to go? Where's the best place we can go where we'll have all the lodgings and beds and everything else that we need? If we have, you think about where's the best place where we can hold the council, where we have lodgings and such. And then he thought that Rajagriha was the best place. And he shared his opinion with the Sangha that they should all go to Rajagriha. And so they basically first all expressed their opinions, and in the end, they all decided that it'd be best to go to Rajagriha. I thought it'd be best to show this to all of you. So these are the ruins of Kushinagara, and below are the ruins of Vaishali. And then here are the ancient remains of Rajagriha. Now, when you go from Kushinagara to Rajagriha, here's when you look at it on Google Maps, to go from Kushinagara to Rajagriha, if you're going to walk, it says it's going to take 60 hours. That's what it writes. And if you follow that path, you're going to walk, but it's going to take basically 59 hours. In any case, from Kushinagara to Rajgir, it's very clear that you have to pass through, if you're going from Kushinagara to Rajgir, you have to pass through Vaishali. The next thing we need to look at is this. So if we look at the order of events as presented in the four-part Vinaya, we've already gone through the decision to hold the council. We've discussed about the Bhikshus from Vriji giving Ananda advice and Ananda achieving the result. So now we're speaking about the discussion of keeping all the minor precepts. Now, at the time, all the bhikshus were getting ready, or they had gone to Vaishali on their way to Rajagriha. So they were on the way to Rajagriha, and they stopped in Vaishali. And what they began to think is they started to think about, well, what do we need to do? How should we prepare for this, they thought. Is it better for us to look for lodgings and beds first, or is it best to discuss the Vinaya first? Is it a discussion about this? Should we, arrange our lodgings first, or is it better to discuss the Vinaya first? When they're discussing everything, they decided that they would arrive in Rajagriha and they'd prepare their lodgings and beds first, and then hold the council. So that's the decision that they made. Now, the distinction in the five-part Vinaya is that when the five acharyas decided to go to Rajagriha, they arrived in Rajagriha. When they got to Rajagriha, the time that they arrived in Rajagriha was actually the first month of the rainy season. So the 3 months in the rainy season, right? The 3 months of the monsoon, and the first one is called. There's a first month and the second month, and each of them has their own name. And so they arrived in the first month of the rainy season. And so when they got there, it was when the time they got there was exactly at that point. And so during the first month of the rains retreat, they decided that they would look for the buildings and bedding and so forth. There must have been some old monasteries, and they needed to restore and repair all those. Then in the middle or the second month of the rainy season, they would sit in meditation, practice samadhi meditation. Then in the third month of the rainy season, only then would they gather in one place and hold the council. Now, before they had the council, what Kashyapa said was, he said to all the bhikshus, oh, please listen to what I have to say. If all of you bhikshus are in agreement and willing, And beginning today, we should invite Upali. We will discuss the Bhikshu and the Bhikshuni of Vinaya and invite Upali to do so. Now, in the Theravada tradition, there is the shorter section of the Vinaya called the Khandaka, and it's basically the same there. They all went to Rajagriha, and when they had arrived in Ganesh, then some of the elder bhikshus had the thought that when we arrived in Rajagriha, the Buddha had in the past and said that it's important for us to maintain and make repairs to our buildings and our chlorobes and so forth, so that they don't go to waste, so that they don't fall apart. The Buddha liked this, and he praised these doing repairs and fixing things highly. So when we arrive in Rajagriha during the first month, we will spend the first month there repairing and fixing up our lodgings and so forth. Then when it comes to the second month, then they'll begin the council to compile the Dharma and the Vinaya. So this is the discussion that they had, and they did exactly that. Now that one. So this is now we're back to the four-part Vinaya, right? So Mahakashyapa had invited many great bhikshus. Now among them, one of the most superior was, if we take the four-part Vinaya, then the one that was greatest in order was Dashabala Kashyapa. And the second one was according to that. He's called in Chinese. It's called Popona. So this could be Purana, but I'm not sure. But later, there's discussion of Purana, the noble Purana not being at the council, so not sure who it is. So at that time, the order of the seniority was, so whether you came to the council or not, so in general at that time, among the bhikshunis, if you think about the seniority in the Sangha, then this is the order, I think. But if we take the four-part Vinaya as a basis, then the noble Purana was not at the four-part Vinaya. Either that or Purana was also the name of another bhikshu. In any case, the second was called in Chinese Popona. The third in seniority was Mahakashyapa, and the fourth was Mahachunda. So a bhikshu named Mahachunda. Now, at that point, Kashyapa took the responsibility of presiding over the Sangha, making the operations, administrating and directing them. He was like the discipline master, the organizer. And what he said to all the bhikshus was, Venerable ones to Sangha, please listen to me. If you all in the Sangha are in consensus and agree, then from today on, we will gather together and compile the Vinaya. So this is the announcement that he made. And when he made this announcement, when he said that, then at that point, Ananda rose from his seat and knelt, and he joined his palms, and what he said was, I actually heard the Buddha say this, and now I'm remembering it. What the Buddha said was, in the future, it'll be possible for the bhikshus to abolish some minor precepts. There are many different precepts in the Vinaya. There's some really smaller, minor ones. So these are the lesser precepts. In the future, it's okay to not keep them and to abolish them or to forget about them. Doing that would be okay. The Buddha said this. Ananda said this to Kashyapa, and at that point, then Kashyapa said to Ananda, at that point, did you ask the Buddha to identify which of the precepts are included among the minor precepts? So what does it mean to say that a precept is a minor precept? What's the difference, the dividing line? Now, at that point, Ananda said, at that point, I didn't really understand, and I wasn't able to ask the Buddha about that. I forgot. But this discussion, but at that time, all of the bhikshus who were gathered there heard Ananda say that that the Buddha had said it was not necessary to keep all the minor precepts. So the bhikshus engaged in some discussions, and they each shared their own opinions. And they're sharing their opinions, and some say that when you talk about the minor precepts, then that means all of the precepts except for the four defeats. All of the rest are minor precepts. Some bhikshus said that all the four defeats and the 13 remainders are not considered minor precepts, but all the other precepts are minor precepts. And some other bhikshus said that the 4 defeats and the 13 remainders, and also the two indeterminate precepts, other than those, all the rest are minor precepts. Now, some bhikshus said that the 4 defeats, the 13 remainders, the 2 indeterminates, and the 13 forfeitures are all grave offenses, and all the rest are minor precepts. And then some bhikshus said that when you talk about all of the precepts from the 4 defeats to the 90 downfalls were major, the rest are minor, they said. Now, in the Theravada tradition, it's basically, in the Theravada Vinaya, it's basically the same, so I don't need to mention that. In any case, what Mahakashyapa said to the bhikshus was, now this is again, we're discussing the 4-part Vinaya presentation. He said, elders, please everyone listen to me. Now, everyone has explained his own different opinion about what the minor precepts are. We've discussed this, but everyone's saying different things. And so it's not clear how we should identify what the precepts are. So my own opinion, he said, was that from today on, that if there's a rule that the Buddha did not make in the past, then we should not make any new rules that the Buddha himself did not make. But if there are rules that the Buddha made in the past, then we should not forget to keep it and abolish it. Instead, we need to respect it and train in it. I think if we do that, that's best, he said. And everyone said, oh, that's good. And that's the decision that they made. Now, according to the Theravada Vinaya, it's basically the same. Kashyapa is basically said in the way, but it's basically the same, but a little bit extra. Now, the extra that they said is that said that all the lay people know that we bhikshus have so many precepts. Everyone knows. They know what is worthy for the sons of the Shakyan to do and what's not worthy for them to do. And if we give up on the minor precepts and forget about them, if we relax the precepts, then what people will say is that the rules for the students of the mendicant Gautama, after the Buddha's passed away, the mendicant Gautama's passed away, then all the rules the Buddha made were going to disappear like smoke. In the past, when their teacher was alive, they trained in Vinaya discipline. And now that the teacher is no longer with us, they no longer train in Vinaya discipline. So that's what people are going to say. So if all the bhikshus are in consensus, then this is what we should do. Basically the same as said before. We should not make any new rules that the Buddha did not, but we should also not abolish the rules that the Buddha has already made. And we instead should keep and respect those rules. And basically Mahakashyapa said, if you agree, then please sit silently. And if you have another opinion, please tell it. And when he said this, then all the bhikshus did not say anything. And so in that way, they made that decision. So everyone seemed to accept it. So that is how it is explained in the Theravada Vinaya tradition. So following this are the Ananda's seven faults. Now, when we speak about the seven faults of Ananda, I'll speak about it a bit more in a couple of days. I thought that I'd speak about that next time. Now, in general, now the order of the seven faults of Ananda. Now, the order of them that are presented in the finer points of discipline from the Tibetan Mula Vastavada tradition, and whether the way it's described in the 4-part and the 5-part Vinaya of the Chinese tradition, the Theravada tradition, they're all different in all of them. Because in our finer points of discipline, at first, before the council, he accused them, Mahakashapa accused Ananda of the 4 faults in order to inspire worry in him. In order that Ananda would achieve arhatship, Mahakashapa said that Ananda had many faults, and he kicked him out of the place. And inspiring discipline, by inspiring weariness in Ananda like this, then he practiced diligently and achieved arhatship. So that's explained in the Mula Sarvastivada traditions. But in the 4-part Vinaya, that's not the order. Because Ananda first achieved the state of Ananda. Then after he came and joined them, only after that did Mahakashapa accuse him of the 6 faults. And likewise, in the 4-part Vinaya, it says that it's a bhikshu from Vidiji who had helped inspire worldliness, and because of that he achieved arhatship. And so I think there's a big difference there between the presentation in the finer points of discipline in the Mula Sarvastivada tradition and the full 4-part, the presentation in the 4-part Vinaya. So I'll speak about that next time. In any case, according to the 4-part Vinaya, then Mahakashapa listed 7 faults of Ananda. And the first is that Kashyapa said to Ananda, "You're the one who instigated allowing a limit to go forth in the Buddha Dharma. That was a fault. It wasn't right. It was against the Dharma. And so you need to confess it with regret." And so, as I said the other day, the Bhikshuni Stulananda had given Mahakashapa a hard time. And while the Buddha was still alive, the Mahakashapa couldn't say anything to Ananda. But when the Buddha passed away, then he had the chance to say to Ananda, "You allowed them to go forth. This wasn't right. This is a fault. This is an offense. And so you need to confess it with regret." So this is the first offense. And Ananda said, "Great Venerable One, I didn't knowingly or intentionally commit a fault or an offense. But at that point in time, Mahaprajapati Gautami had been very kind to the Buddha. And the reason is because the Buddha's mother had passed away, and so the one who raised him, the one who cared for him, was Mahaprajapati. And so she had the hope, and so I supported her in that." So I do not think that this is a fault. But when you say that I've committed an offense, then it's because I have confidence in you that I will confess it with regret now. So when you said this, and I'm going to say, I don't think it's not, but I'm saying that I'm going to confess as if it is an offense. That was the first fault. And the second fault or offense was, the Buddha said to you 3 times that you need to be his attendant. He said it 3 times. And the Buddha said 3 times, but you still didn't accept it. He said it once, he said it twice, he said it a 3rd time, and you still didn't accept it. And this is an offense. So you also need to regret that with offense. You need to confess that with regret. Then Ananda said, "I didn't do that intentionally," said Ananda. An opportunity to attend to the Buddha is extremely difficult to get. It's really difficult. to have that opportunity. It's just difficult. So I just felt I was unable. And I said that's why I said I was unable. And so I do not think that I only have a fault, but since you say it's an offense, because I have an offense, I confess it with regret. So that's the second offense. Now, whether they're right or not, I don't need to explain them. You can think for yourselves about whether they're really offenses. Now, this is the next is the third offense. Now, the third offense is that what Kashyapa spoke, and we said, and you were studying the Buddha's robes, because it was Nanda who sewed the Buddha's robes. So when you were sewing the robes, you intentionally stepped on the Buddha's robe. Because sometimes when you're studying, you have to hold something underneath you put it underneath your knee, you have to hold something underneath you have to hold it down like that. So you intentionally stepped on and pressed down the Buddha's robe, and this is a fault, this is being disrespectful, so you need to confess it with regret. He's really looking hard for these faults. Zimbabwe had people sitting there looking at so when he was someone who's probably watching him wear the robes. When he was sitting there sewing the robes, he held he says holding them down with his leg or with his foot, and said, "This is an offense." And Kashyapa said, "I didn't do this out of pride. I didn't intentionally sit it out of pride to step on it, and I didn't do it like that. I don't think that is a fault. But when you say that it is an offense, then because I have confidence in you, I confess it with regret now." The next is the fourth, right? The fourth offense was the Buddha said to you 3 times, "I'm going to pass away." He said this 3 times. And when he says that, you should immediately get up and say to the Buddha, "Please stay for an entire eon." Because if the Buddha had lived for an eon, he would have brought many beings to benefit and happiness, and all gods and humans would have gained happiness. And you didn't do that. This is a fault. This is an offense. So you should confess it with regret. The answer that Ananda gave was, okay, Venerable Kashyapa, it's not like I did that intentionally. At that time, I'd been possessed by Mara. And I wasn't able to ask the Buddha. So at that point, it's basically that he didn't quite understand it or something, because he lost his memory for a moment, he lost his consciousness for a moment. And he said, it's not my fault there. He said, I didn't do this intentionally, it's not a fault. But because I have confidence in you, I confess, and you say it's an offense, then I will confess it with regret. So that was the fourth. Now the fifth one, when the Buddha was alive, there was one time when he said to you, "You should go carry him water." And he said, "You should go water." You didn't give him any water. And so that's another offense of yours. When he says, "Bring me water," and you didn't bring him water. And you should do it. That's an offense. So when he says he wants water and you didn't bring it, so that's a fault, an offense, and you should confess it with regret. So Nanda said, I didn't do this intentionally. I didn't intentionally not give him water. At that point where the water, there were lots of wagons that he passed through. There weren't any cars at that time because there weren't. There are many carts, 500 works. No, then they're saying wagons, and I don't know whether there's actually 500, but there are a lot of carts that had gone by there. And all of the dust and dirt from that had polluted all the water. It all became really filthy and turbid. And if you give the water that's turgid, they thought it'd make the Buddha sick, and so I didn't give it to him. So this is the answer that Ananda gave. So what Kashyapa said to that is, you should have given the water. The Buddha said you should fetch water, so you should have given it to him. Because the Buddha has the power to turn turgid water into clean water. So immediately, when he asks you to fetch him water, you should immediately go get some water and give it to him. But you didn't. That's what Ananda said said, I didn't do this intelligent. I don't think that I committed an offense, but because I have confidence here, I confess it with regret now. Now, the sixth one is, once again, Kashyapa spoke. He said, when the Buddha said that you can relax the minor precepts in the future, that you don't need to keep the minor precepts. And when the Buddha said this, at that point, you should ask him clearly, what are the minor precepts? And then you didn't, so no one can agree about it. And that's your fault. That's your offense. So you need to confess with regret. And so Ananda said to that, he said, I didn't do this intentionally. But at that point, I didn't really understand. And I forgot. And because I forgot, I didn't understand. I forgot to ask the Buddha. I think at this time, I'm not sure about it, but this is about the time when the Buddha was about to pass away. And I think at that time, Ananda was grieving. He wasn't happy about it. When the Buddha was speaking, he just said, okay, but he didn't really have the time or the thought to think about it. But it's not clear to me if that's so. In any case, I don't think that this is an offense, but since you're saying this, because you're saying this, I have confidence in you, so I confess it with regret. Now, the last one, this is the very last one, the seventh offense. This is one that I mentioned before. When Mahakashyapa had previously gone to see the Buddha, the Buddha's foot had come out of the coffin, and Kashyapa saw it and he saw that it was dirty. And Ananda said that there were many people, and they're prostrating, they were crying as they prostrated to the Buddha, and because the tears got in their hands, and so they touched their hands to the Buddha's foot, and this soiled the Buddha's feet. And so Kashyapa said, you didn't prevent them, you didn't stop them. And because of that, the women soiled the Buddha's foot. And so this is your offense. So you need to confess it with regret. What Ananda said to that says, I didn't do this intentionally, to get soiled the Buddha's foot intentionally. The women were not heedful, they weren't careful, and they were prostrated to the Buddha. They were really grieving, and so they were crying and weeping. And so that got on their hands, and their hands got dirty, and then when they touched the Buddha's foot, then it got a little dirty. So I do not think that this is my own fault. But since you say it's my offense, I have confidence in you, and I'll confess it with regret now. So in any case, so if we take this four-part Vinaya as the basis, then Mahakashyapa said that Ananda had committed 7 offenses, 7 inappropriate things that he should not have done. So these are 7 faults that Mahakashyapa accused Ananda of at a place where everyone could hear this. Now, Ananda was a really good person. Now, most people would say when you say that, people say, now that the Buddha's passed away, you're immediately attacking me, they'd say. And so I don't think that these are offenses, but you said that offense, then I believe that there are offenses and make the confession. Now, in terms of the offenses of Ananda, there are different accounts of that. In some of the accounts, in the different conjurators and the words of the Buddha, and some of the words of the Buddha said that there are up to 9. The largest quantity is that there are 9 offenses, and the lowest is saying that there are 5 offenses. And I'll speak about these later. I'll speak about the offenses of Ananda later. So I think that is probably a good place to leave it for today. Thank you.